guys. I want to bring in my panel, Liberal MP Tim Wilson and Labor frontbencher Matt Thistlethwaite. They're both my guests, and we're going to pour over this budget. Let's begin. NDIS first, and to you, that's a significant underspend. Shouldn't you be fixing that and ensuring that the NDIS is fully funded and works rather than kind of banking the savings?
Well, the reality is, Patricia, the NDIS is fully funded. The allegations being made by the opposition isn't just cheap, it isn't just nasty, it's despicable. And the reality is that where funding is available and people seek to apply for it, we are getting it out of the door to make sure that those most vulnerable in our community need it. Now, we've projected the amount of expenditure. The full expenditure hasn't gone out the door, but that's not because there's some sort of mean-spirited attempt to do anything. It's actually about making sure that we match factually how much money is being committed and then how much is actually being spent.
But if you listen to the disability sector, they say actually it's incredibly hard to get into this sector. It's been full of delays and problems. So clearly there is a problem going on here.
Now, the implication behind this statement is that there is some sort of deliberate and malicious attempt. We are accountable for every cent of public money. We are making sure that money is spent appropriately, and we are making sure that the people who need that money are getting it within those parameters.
So are you relaxed about that underspend? Because it seems very large to me.
I am not relaxed about an underspend or an overspend. The difference between us and the opposition is when they left government, they made the promises of the NDIS. They didn't fund the NDIS fully. We funded it fully, and we've made sure that at every point money has got out the door to make sure it gets to the people who need it. But we have to make sure probity, accountability, and making sure that people aren't being ripped off as well. That's what we're doing.
OK, Matt, write a reply on that one. Labor making a very strong statement, and that is a pretty loaded question that Linda Burney asked. What do you make of Tim Wilson's rationale? It's just about the people that come through the door and they do get the services if they ask for them.
Well, Patricia, the claim that Linda made is the truth, and every MP knows in their electorate offices they've had complaints from constituents about the rollout of the NDIS, predominantly related to the fact that there's been an underspend and they haven't had the staff that they need to cater for the needs of the community. There's been delays in the rollout of plans. The philosophy of the scheme is great, but the implementation has been handled very poorly by this government.
Okay,
and as a
so
result
what would
of that,
Labor do then? So do you want to spend all of that money? Is that money now not going to be included in future surplus or savings as outlined by Labor?
Well, Labor created the NDIS. We're very, very proud of it, and it's something that
you're going to spend all of that money.
We believe that we can fix some of these problems and ensure that the NDIS is rolled out properly in the wider community. But to
you haven't answered my question. Will you spend all of that money?
To build a surplus on savings, and about a third of the surplus projected, let's face it, we're not in surplus this year, we're in a budget deficit this year. They're projecting a surplus next year. To build that on a third of the saving being on an underspend on the NDIS, we think is pretty despicable, and that's something that we'll look to fix if we're elected at the next election.
Does that include spending all of that money?
Well, look, we'll look to the budget position that we inherit. We'll look at the policy and we'll look to make sure that we can fix those problems within the NDIS.
So would you like to do it more cheaply, or would you like to bank some of the savings too, which is what the government's done?
We've said that we'll be in a position to return the budget to surplus at the same time as the government, and we should be in a better position than the government.
But on the NDIS spend is the question.
Well, look, you take into consideration a whole host of issues, but we've said that we will fix those problems with the NDIS, and we'll make sure that the budget returns to surplus at the same time.
OK, let's talk about this New Start payment backflip, which has really consumed your side of politics today. Instead of selling the budget, you've been kind of mopping up what seemed like a mistake, although Matthias Cormann said it wasn't a mistake that it wasn't included in the budget. Has it been a distraction? Are you disappointed that it wasn't just put in the budget?
Well, I think it's been an unfortunate distraction because it's actually the funding has been provided for people to be able to get this energy supplement.
Should have been in the budget, right?
Well, and the Matthias, I mean, as you know, I wasn't in the middle scratching out the different parts of the budget before it was done.
They like to be one, don't they?
But the reality is that the money is being provided for the people who need it. And of course, as the Treasurer has outlined, many people who are on New Start are also on other types of supplementary payments, and so those were being provided. So the money's there. It's being provided. One of the great strengths of this budget is that we have the financial capacity to finance these sorts of energy supplements for households, for individuals and for couples, so they can be provided. And so that removes any ambiguity, is the strong fiscal position that this government is delivering.
OK, but Matthias Cormann told me it was a deliberate decision not to put it in the budget. Do you think that was a mistake?
Well, you have to go and ask those questions about...
No, well, do you think it was a mistake?
I think...
I've asked him already.
I think any distraction away from the core theme of this budget, which is we are returning the budget surplus credibly. We're making sure that there is record spending in health and education, $100 billion in infrastructure, anything that distracts from those core messages about how we're delivering tax cuts and tax relief for millions of Australians, including 77,000 people in the Goldstein electorate, is unfortunate, because that's where I want the focus to be, and I suspect that's where everybody else wants it to be.
So the government's fixed it now. It may have not been in the budget, but they've fixed it. Why not give them credit for not sort of having a long debate about it, but actually just making sure that it goes into the legislation?
Well, we're glad it's been fixed, but it's been 24 hours and the government's budget's unravelled already.
But didn't they fix it straight away? That's another way to say it.
This was meant to be Josh Frydenberg's big opportunity to save this government, and the budget hasn't lasted 24 hours. They've made a monumental mistake. How you could make that sort of mistake...
It's one element of a big budget.
But how you could make that sort of mistake for people on New Start, it's not only New Start, there's a whole host of other ab study, people on parenting payments that
you couldn't even answer a few seconds ago whether you wanted to spend the money that you were claiming was being run.
I'll just let him finish his sentence.
I mean, please.
They've missed a major proportion of people that are receiving welfare payments, and they've corrected it. The budget's unravelled in less than 24 hours. It's a major stuff-up.
All right, well, I have a very pointed question for you then on New Start. Labor goes on about New Start. You've got a review. Aren't you just dragging your feet? You know that it needs to rise. You say you know it. Why don't you just announce a New Start rise rather than another review? You're kicking the can down the road, aren't you?
Because it's actually quite complicated. There's a whole host of other government payments that people who are typically on New Start may be accessing as well. So when Labor was last in government, we increased the pension. It was the historic rise in the pension. Before we did that, we got an independent expert to do a thorough review of the pension, the interaction with other payments, and make sure that it was the right thing to do, and more importantly, that the quantum was the right increase. Okay. They're the issues that we need to take into consideration.
Do you want to make sure that it's delivered, if you're elected, of course, big if, election has to happen first, in a first term of a Bill Shorten government?
Well, we'll have the review first.
Do you think it should happen in the first term?
I think it should be a priority for an incoming government. There's no doubt about that. That's inherent in the nature of the fact that we're saying we're having a review. But we'll take the advice of the expert who recommends the changes to New Start on board.
Tim Wilson, your colleague Arthur Sinodinos says New Start should rise. In fact, Business also says New Start should rise. I could list a very long list of groups that think New Start should rise. Do you agree?
Well, it actually does rise. It rises twice.
No.
Hang on.
Fundamentally changing the system. I'm not going to take that one.
No, I didn't even finish my answer.
Well, because it's inaccurate.
No, that's not actually true. It does rise, just like other government benefits also rise as well.
Fundamentally changing.
And fundamentally, this comes down to the choices that we confront in the budget, and that's what you saw last night. You saw a government that has taken a position of saying the strength and health of the finances of the nation must come first. We make sure that we provide the environment for jobs to be created, because we've always had this view, and I am quite unapologetic about it. I have a strong view that the best welfare system is to create an environment so that people can go and get jobs.
Absolutely.
And the objective of New Start has always been to make sure that people trampoline off it and go into work. And that is where our focus is, rather than trying to create an environment where people feel that they should stay on New Start.
So you're not on the Arthur Sinodinos team of thinking it needs to be looked at and... Well,
these things always need to be looked at as part of a discussion around the budget, but at the moment...
What do you think, your own personal view?
Well, I remember I had a discussion about this earlier in the year, or last year, on another ABC program, and people asked whether it was possible, and I said it is possible. This is very difficult, and I'm not trying to pretend even for a second, which is why I've always focused on making sure who are on it can get off it and get into a job. And we've delivered 1 million jobs, and we're aiming to achieve another 1.25 million jobs if we're re-elected. And frankly, that's the best way to get people into a sustainable position, not relying on New Start.
All right, let's talk about the big tax plan that was announced by your government. And you last year, your side of politics announced a focus too on middle-income earners and lower-income earners. Chris Bowen keeps telling us that he wants to focus on people who are under $40,000 a year. What do you want to do there?
Well, we offered a bigger tax cut for people in that tax bracket last year. But
and will there be more for those people?
Well, we'll make that call tomorrow night. I'm not going to reveal now what we're going to put in our budget reply tomorrow night, much as you would like some breaking news. But it's good that the government has copied what Labor did last year in providing that low to middle income tax offset up to the value of $1,000 for people on less than $125,000. So Labor's tax plan was put out there last year. It's good to see that the government's listened and copied that.
Is your tax plan fair? Because people under $40,000 don't fare as well. They would fare much better under Labor, and we'll see if there'll be even more in that space in the Bill Shorten speech and announcements. How is your tax plan fair?
It's fair across the board for every different a group of people in every different income bracket. We're making sure that people on low and middle incomes are getting an offset and making sure they're in a position. We can only deliver that because we have a strong economy, the capacity to finance it, which is critical to what this government has prioritised and achieved. We've also set out a plan for tax reform to flatten out the tax system, so it doesn't matter pretty much who you are, you're almost certainly not going to pay more than 30 cents in the dollar in your income to tax. Now, of course, the high income earners will continue to pay more, but that's a very small percentage of the community. So what we want to do is create an environment of aspiration. That's fairness. People who stand on their own 2 feet, who want to have a wicket and have a go and be in the best position to care for themselves and their family, we're going to back them. That's fair.
Let's talk about this Christmas Island item, which I was quite intrigued by in the budget, because you closed Christmas Island, then you reopened it. It doesn't appear that anyone's on it, and now you're going to close it again in July. It was meant to cost over $1 billion, but now suddenly it isn't. Do you accept that the public would look at that and think, was the government spinning something to us?
Let me make this crystal clear. The government never wanted to open Christmas Island, like it didn't want a situation where we inherited people who were on Manus or Nauru. Our objective at every point has been to get people reprocessed, resettled and move on with their lives.
But it looks like a public relations exercise. Well, the Prime Minister turning up there, spending a lot of taxpayer money for a non-announcement, and now you're going to close it again.
No, there is a practical reality we face around the consequences directly from
why isn't anyone
the passage there? Sorry?
No,
these sorts of matters, the health matters dealt with by the department and with doctors, and I don't have access to their medical privacy, and nor should I. What we have to do is make sure that we take the preventative measures to protect Australia's border security and to care for those people who may come to Australia. This is a preventative action, but our preference at every point is I want people out of offshore processing. I want people into a situation where they're moving on with their lives. We inherited the current situation. Our objective has been to conclude it like we have with onshore detention as well.
What do you make of it? Will you close it in July as well?
Well, it's what a joke from this government. You know, this was the hysteria that they whipped up in the wake of the Medivac bill passing through the Parliament, and they went to Christmas Island. The Prime Minister jetted everyone over there. It cost about $2,000 a minute for that press conference that he held. Whipped up hysteria and fear within the community. For what reason? Nothing whatsoever. They're indicating that they're closing it.
So will Labor close it in July just like the government?
Oh, well, look, I think we will, yes. I think we will. There's no need for it. The government, again, has been caught short on this, trying to whip up hysteria, trying to use this as an election issue when it wasn't an issue in the community after all. And I think they stand condemned for that because it's a bad decision and they've been shown out on it in the budget.
Just finally, I know neither of you are in charge of this, but Tim Wilson, should Senate estimates sit next week, or do you think an election should come sooner rather than later?
Well, I think it's been scheduled and it's going ahead, and I have no issue with it going ahead.
You know, I know some of your colleagues think let's just go to an election.
The truth is I haven't really thought about it. I don't have a burning desire.
You don't think about the election date? Come on. That's all I do. I pore over the dates.
Can I say, when you're in Parliament, every second person says, when's the election going to be? And now my response is, I'm overthinking or caring about it. It's not my decision. We'll leave it to the public. What has been in our decision and what has been in our control is the reality of, have we been able to clean up the legacy of the former government? It's taken 6 years to be able to do so, whether it's debt and deficit, whether it's a tragedy and the human consequences of relaxed borders, and that's where my focus remains.
I imagine you'd like an election as soon as possible?
Well, given the division and chaos, the cuts, I think the Australian people want an election. They want to make a decision on this disastrous government. But if the government doesn't call an election, then sure, Senate estimates should go ahead.
OK, well, this has been an interesting conversation. Let's revisit this during the campaign. Can we make a deal now?
Happy to.
Sure. All right, you're both coming in. Thank you so much.